What is up, everybody? Boss here, welcome back to Boss Economic World, the only show that decodes the matrix of money and power to tell you what's really going on. Alright, let's get right into it. The date is October 22nd, 2025. For the past year, the global economy has been walking a tightrope over a pit of fire-breathing crocodiles. On one side, you have sticky inflation that just won't go away. On the other, the looming threat of a global slowdown. And holding the tightrope at either end? You guessed it. The two biggest titans on the playground, the United States and China. This week, the entire financial world is holding its breath for what's being billed as the Super Bowl of geopolitical poker, a potential face-to-face meeting between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC summit in South Korea. The stakes? Oh, nothing much. Just the future of global trade, the trajectory of your 401k, the price of your next iPhone, and whether the world tips into a full-blown economic Cold War 2.0. Now, if you've been following the news, you saw Trump in his element yesterday. He was in the White House Rose Garden, doing what he does best, creating suspense. He told a group of lawmakers he expects a good deal with President Xi. A good deal. Fair. These are classic Trumpisms. He's framing this as a personal negotiation, a battle of wits between two strong leaders. He's selling his base on the idea that he, and only he, can go into that room and emerge with a win for America. But then, in the very next breath, he throws in the twist. And that, my friends, is the whole game right there. Is it a deal? Is it not a deal? Is it nasty? Is it just business? By creating this uncertainty, Trump is trying to maximize his leverage. He's telling Beijing, I'm ready to walk away. The pressure is on you. But is it? Let's pull back the curtain and look at the full picture, because this isn't just about two guys in a room. This is the culmination of years of economic maneuvering, and both sides are coming to the table with their own set of bruises. To understand why this meeting is so critical right now, we need a quick look at the economic scorecards for Team USA and Team China. On the US side, Trump rode back into the White House on a promise to finish the job and tame the inflation beast that defined the early 2020s. And to be fair, the numbers are better. Headline CPI is down from the nightmarish 9% peaks of 2022 to a very sticky 3.8%. But that's the problem, it's sticky. The Fed, after a series of brutal rate hikes through 2023, has been on pause for nearly a year, terrified of either reigniting inflation or tipping the economy into a deep recession. The S&P 500 has been trading sideways, hovering nervously around 5,400. GDP growth for the last quarter was a tepid 1.5%. For Trump, the clock is ticking. The 2026 midterm elections are just over the horizon. He needs a big, visible win. He needs to show his base he's fighting for them, and nothing plays better in the heartland than looking tough on China and, ideally, bringing home a win that he can claim lowers prices for American families. Now, let's flip to China. President Xi is grappling with a completely different, but equally severe, set of problems. The Chinese economic miracle has hit a brick wall. The property sector, which used to account for a staggering 25 to 30% of their GDP, is in a state of controlled demolition. You all remember the Evergrande saga? Well, in 2025, we've had the Celestial Holdings default, which sent another shockwave through their financial system. Worse yet is the youth unemployment crisis. The official numbers, which are likely sugar-coated, have been stubbornly above 20% for over 2 years. That's a ticking social time bomb for a government whose legitimacy rests on delivering prosperity and stability. Xi's dual circulation strategy, the grand plan to pivot from relying on exports to boosting domestic consumption, is sputtering. It turns out you can't get people to spend when their life savings are tied up in unfinished apartments and their kids can't find jobs. So, Xi needs a stable external environment. He needs the export machine, which still provides tens of millions of jobs, to keep humming. He can't afford a full-blown trade war that would crater his manufacturing sector and pour gasoline on his domestic fires. He needs to project strength and resolve, but he also desperately needs a deal. See the setup? Both leaders are acting tough, but both are backed into a corner. It's a high-stakes game of chicken where both drivers are secretly hoping the other one swerves first. So, what are they actually fighting over? The White House has been conveniently leaking the agenda. Let's break down the key battlegrounds, because this is where the real economic warfare is happening. 1. The sledgehammer, tariffs and market access. This is the old classic, the primary weapon in the Trump arsenal. Before this thaw, Trump was threatening to slap a universal 15% tariff on all Chinese goods, and up to 60% on specific high-tech sectors like electric vehicles and solar panels. For Trump, this is simple. It plays well politically, it protects American industries, and it's a giant club to swing at the negotiating table. The problem? His own Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, knows that broad-based tariffs are basically a tax on American consumers. You slap a 15% tariff on everything from China, and that sticky 3.8% inflation we talked about? It could easily jump back over 5% within months. Your trip to Target suddenly gets a whole lot more expensive. For China, removing the existing tariffs from the first trade war is a top priority. It's a direct stimulus to their export sector. They will argue that Trump's threatened new tariffs violate WTO rules and will promise swift retaliation. This brings us to their favorite political weapon. 2. The political football, soybeans. Why are we always talking about soybeans? Because they are a politically guided missile. When China wants to inflict maximum political pain on a US president, particularly a Republican one, they stop buying American soybeans. The US is the world's largest producer, and China is the world's largest importer. It's a perfect fit. In the run-up to this summit, Chinese purchases had dwindled. US soybean exports to China were down 40% year-over-year in the first half of 2025. That's devastating for farmers in states that Trump needs to win in 2026 and 2028. Then, just 2 weeks ago, as a goodwill gesture, Chinese state-owned firms made their largest single-day purchase of US soybeans in 3 years. You see the game? They're dangling the carrot. Play nice, they're signaling, and we'll keep your farmers happy. Escalate things, and we'll crush their incomes. Trump will want a firm, long-term commitment on agricultural purchases. She will only give it in exchange for major concessions. 3. The ace of spades, rare earths. This is where the game gets really interesting. If tariffs are a sledgehammer, rare earths are a surgical scalpel. These 17 elements, with names like neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium, are the secret sauce in everything high-tech. They are the vitamins of the modern economy. You can't build an F-35 fighter jet, a wind turbine, an electric vehicle motor, or even a smartphone without them. And China has a near monopoly. They don't have all the reserves, but they control over 85% of the global processing capacity. It's a dirty, difficult, and expensive business that other countries offshored to China decades ago. Just last month, Beijing announced fresh curbs on the export of these materials, implementing a new, opaque licensing system. This was a direct shot across the bow. It was China saying, "You think your CHIPS Act and your tech restrictions hurt us? We can turn off the power to your entire green energy transition and defense industry overnight." This is China's ultimate leverage. The US has been scrambling to build alternative supply chains, pouring billions into mines in California and partnering with Australia and Canada. But these projects take years to come online. In October 2025, the US is still critically dependent on China. Trump will demand that China roll back these restrictions. She will use them as his single most powerful bargaining chip to get the US to ease its own tech restrictions, especially on high-end semiconductors. For the elephant in the room, Taiwan and semiconductors. While the official talks will focus on trade, the giant, unsaid issue looming over everything is Taiwan. And when we talk about Taiwan in economic terms, we are talking about one company, TSMC. TSMC is, without exaggeration, the single most important company in the world. They manufacture over 90% of the world's most advanced microchips, the brains inside Apple's latest devices, NVIDIA's AI GPUs, and America's most advanced military hardware. The US position, under the Taiwan Relations Act, is strategic ambiguity. But from an economic standpoint, there is no ambiguity. A Chinese blockade or invasion of Taiwan would instantly halt the global supply of advanced chips, sending the world economy into a depression that would make 2008 look like a minor hiccup. Trump knows this. She knows this. Trump will use the meeting to warn Xi against any military aggression, framing it as an act of economic self-destruction for the entire world. Xi, in turn, will demand that the US stop selling arms to Taiwan and stop treating it like an independent country. This is the geopolitical third rail of the negotiation. It's so explosive that any good deal on trade will likely involve both sides agreeing to just quiet down about Taiwan for a while. 5. The human cost as a bargaining chip, fentanyl. Finally, there's fentanyl. The opioid crisis has been a scourge in the US, and the precursor chemicals for this deadly drug overwhelmingly originate in China. For years, the US has been pleading with Beijing to crack down on the companies that produce and ship these chemicals. This is a deeply emotional and political issue for Trump. He can score huge points with his base by being seen as the one who finally forced China to stop the flow. China, for its part, has often used its cooperation on fentanyl as a bargaining chip. In the past, when trade tensions flared up, their cooperation would mysteriously dry up. Now, with talks on the table, they're suddenly making high-profile busts and promising renewed collaboration. It's another lever. She will offer up a win on fentanyl, but it won't be free. The price will be concessions elsewhere. One last piece of the puzzle, the man on the ground. The talks are being prepped by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. This isn't Janet Yellen, the academic economist. Bessent is a hedge fund guy, a former chief investment officer for George Soros. He's a stone-cold transactional operator. His presence signals a shift in the US approach. It's less about the grand theories of free trade and more about what's the bottom line. What can we get right now? Bessent's job is to go in, find the outlines of a deal that Trump can sell as a victory, and de-escalate the immediate threats, new tariffs and the rare earth embargo, that could tank the market. He's not there to solve the fundamental US-China rivalry, he's there to secure a truce. So, where does this all lead? As I see it, there are 3 possible outcomes from this APEC showdown. Scenario 1, the good deal. This is the outcome Trump is advertising. In this scenario, China agrees to massive, long-term purchases of U.S. agricultural and energy products. They make a highly public, verifiable commitment to crack down on fentanyl precursors. In return, the U.S. agrees not to implement the new, sweeping tariffs and maybe slightly reduces some existing ones. Both sides agree to a strategic dialogue on rare earths and tech, basically kicking that can down the road. Market reaction, huge relief rally. The S&P 500 could break 5,600. For you, your 401k gets a nice boost. The threat of immediate inflation from tariffs recedes. But the underlying tensions? They're still there, just papered over. Scenario 2, the no deal. This is the maybe it won't happen scenario. Trump decides the deal on the table isn't good enough. He walks away to look tough, accusing China of not being fair. He makes good on his threat and announces a timeline for the new 15% universal tariff. China immediately retaliates by canceling agricultural orders and formally restricting the export of key rare earths needed for EV and defense manufacturing. Market reaction, absolute panic. A 10 to 15% market correction in a matter of weeks. The VIX would spike. For you, stagflation, here we come. Inflation shoots up due to tariffs, while global growth grinds to a halt due to the trade war. Your portfolio takes a massive hit, and the cost of everything goes up. Scenario 3, the muddle-through. This is the gray area in between. There's no grand bargain, but no catastrophic breakdown either. They meet, they smile for the cameras, and they announce a framework or an agreement to keep talking. They agree to a temporary truce, no new tariffs from the US, and no new export controls from China for, say, 6 months. They might announce a small fentanyl working group and a symbolic soybean purchase. It's a deal to de-escalate without solving anything. Market reaction, a brief, muted sigh of relief, followed by lingering uncertainty. The market avoids a crash but doesn't get the fuel for a major rally. For you, the status quo continues. The cloud of the trade war remains on the horizon, but it's not raining just yet. You have more time, but the fundamental risks haven't disappeared. This meeting isn't about friendship or fairness. It's about leverage and necessity. Both Trump and Xi are constrained by their domestic economic problems, and both are looking for a way to declare victory without giving away the farm. What you're watching is a masterclass in economic statecraft where soybeans are weapons, rare metals are hostages, and the fate of the global economy hangs on whether two men can find a way to both save face and save their economies at the same time. My money is on scenario 3, the muddle-through. It allows both leaders to walk away and tell their home audiences what they want to hear. Trump can say, I stood up to them, and they backed down from their threats. Xi can say, I defended our national interests and prevented American bullying. It solves nothing in the long run. But in the high-stakes, short-term world of politics and economics in 2025, sometimes the only winning move is not to play, and just postpone the game for another day. We'll be watching every move. Stay tuned. That's all for today. This stuff is complicated, but it's your money and your future. You deserve to know the whole story. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and let me know your predictions in the comments. Until next time, stay savvy.